You are listening to The Fortress. Welcome back to The Fortress, guys. We're going to be interviewing a friend of mine, Jerry Clybourne, in a little while. And he is a good friend of mine who appears as a character known as the Warden in my second novel, Mistaken. Now, he'll tell you a little bit about himself and other things in our interview, but I wanted to start out tonight by just talking a little bit about acknowledging evil. We need to at least acknowledge it. If something is a threat and you don't acknowledge that threat, you can't really protect yourself from it, can you? Now, I know that God assures us He will be our protector and we can trust in Him. But at the same time, God gave David a sling with which to take out Goliath. God provided weapons for the Israelites in the Old Testament to defend themselves when people attacked them. And, unfortunately, He even sent in the Israelites with weapons to take out evil people. Wicked people who were sinners and who were doing horrible, just horrid things. And things that did not please God. Now, I'm not saying we should do that, but we should prepare ourselves to protect ourselves, to take some precautions when there's something as dangerous and evil out there as ISIS. I always like this quote, and it's basically, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he doesn't exist. Think about all the problems we have and we've had in this country, such as racism. My friend Jeremy, who was here just a couple weeks ago with us, he said that, it's an uncomfortable subject, people don't want to talk about it, but we need to at least acknowledge that the problem is there. Not just racism. What about corruption? Guys, if you haven't accepted the fact that there's corruption within our own government yet, you need to take off those blinders. Take them off. Open your eyes. Pay attention. Corruption is there. We've got to acknowledge it. You can't protect yourself from it if you can't even acknowledge that it's a problem. And then, of course, nobody's going to want to mention this, especially by name, because we might offend somebody. Islam. I know there are peaceful Muslims out there, and I want to have peace with Muslims. But if you go and look at the Quran, if you read the Quran, I'm about 24 surahs into it now, it is a political ideology that just uses religion as a way to take control of the people. Now, some people want to compare the Bible to the Quran. It is not the same. The Quran is written in such a way to where Islam can control people through submission, through forcing them to submit. The Bible gives people free will. You choose God rather than listen to me or else. Now, there's kind of a listen to me or else feeling, but that's because if we choose God, we are choosing good versus choosing evil. But it's like God just wants us to choose to love Him rather than bending you over at the neck, putting a sword there and saying, submit or else. It's a real problem, and people don't want to acknowledge it. And a lot of the Muslims out there who are peaceful, it's because they read all the good things that they like from the Quran. And a lot of them don't even read. That's the other thing. The Quran was written for people who can't read. And it was only written by clerics. Clerics who did the bidding of their almighty prophet, who basically came up with this religious way of controlling people and this supposed vision because people wouldn't accept his ideas and his thoughts on and his idea of God. You know, because he disagreed with what the Jewish people had been believing for years. There's a whole lot of history there. I'm not smart enough to be able to convey well enough how it's all tied together. But if you do your homework, and you do your reading, read the Quran, read some history, read the history of the Israelites, read the Bible, make sure that's probably the most important part. But guys, you've got to acknowledge Islam is a tool the devil is using in this world to bring about more evil. Muslims don't want to hear that. Of course not. But then, why don't they try harder as a group, as a whole, to eradicate this radical teaching that is basically original Islam? So, chew on that for a little while. Alright, we're going to go to a break. When we come back, you'll get to meet my friend Jerry, and we'll take it from there.
Shut up and sit down.
An Egyptian holy man for the religion of Islam is assassinated, and the killer leaves a gold cross as his calling card. The same Christian assassin kills on U.S. soil, and it is now up to the FBI and Interpol to bring him to justice. FBI agents John Knox and Beth White team up with Interpol Inspector Malik Sharif, but they are at a loss when the assassin leaves no trace of evidence at crime scenes. Meanwhile, the assassin is starting his own personal war with Muslims, and the government he works for becomes suspicious. Can a Christian FBI agent and a Muslim Interpol officer put aside their differences and perhaps even use them to track down the assassin? Can Agent White battle her spiritual demons? Can the agents find the killer before the media turns the case into an international religious circus? Join the investigators on a journey that will remind you of the latest assassin-style video game and your latest crime novel. But before it's all over, ask yourself, is the assassin any different than you or me, or is he just misguided?
Welcome back to the Fortress, guys. So this is my friend Jerry that I told you would be a surprise guest this week. Jerry is the former captain of an entire security department for the health system where we work. So first of all, Jerry, welcome to my house.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's this is an unusual situation for me. I'm not used to being interviewed for anything, so that's it's going to be fun. It's going to be a challenge.
Well, there's a first time for everything.
Absolutely.
But you know, I really appreciate the fact I didn't even know that, or I didn't think about, you know, Woodruff being a whole hour from here. So I really appreciate you coming out for this.
It was a journey, but you were worth it.
All right, so we're going to get into some of that being worth it in just a little bit when we talk about one of his literary idols. But Jerry, I don't want to give away too much about you. Why don't you tell the audience out there a little bit about you?
Well, I've just recently given up on being determining what I wanted to do when I grew up. After 52 years of working, I recently retired. I have given up, no longer in pursuit of anything specific. Prior to that, I was in healthcare security for about 5.5 years. Prior to that, I was in the corporate world, primarily in Phoenix, Arizona. I've held a lot of positions, some of them more important than others to some people. But it's been a good ride, and now I'm just enjoying the retirement years, as they say.
Right, and some of my questions later are almost a dig at retirement, but at the same time it's out of envy and jealousy.
Oh,
Trust
okay.
me.
Take your best shot, buddy.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to skip around a little bit here. We've already done our interview for the radio show, but, you know, you are kind of related to me in a little bit, in a sense that you've read my books and you play a part in the second book. So since we already have that connection, because I'm an author, you're part of a story. Let's talk about one of your favorite authors and who he is. Tell me, tell the listeners who your favorite author is, or one of your favorite literary figures, and what drew you to Mark Twain.
Well, as you say, Mark Twain is an author that I have the utmost admiration for. I am very enviable of his command of the language, enviable of his control, his wit, his humor, his viewpoint on the world. Some of it is a little more tainted than others, but nonetheless, this was an individual that I've learned a lot from, Jason, in the fact that in his autobiography, he stipulated that first he had tried to write his autobiography in a chronological order. And if you think about it, life is not in a chronological order. We put it into one just for our own purposes. But his way of doing it was, I'm going to write about today what is important to me today. Now, it could be something as simple as what tonight's event is. Or it could be something that with my childhood. Or it could be something with the next trip that I took. Or it's what is important today. And that was his viewpoint, for which he wrote 3 voluminous volumes. And upon his death in 1910, at the age of 75 years old, he had completed his entire autobiography. And during that time, he stipulated that to not harm anyone in any way, that for 100 years after his death, his work could not be published. And then only after, in 2010, did the first of the 3 volumes come out. To me, it showed great restraint, respect, and caring for those around him, and then expressing so much of what he was about, his innermost thoughts. Some of them a little more jaded than others, some a little more tainted than others, some a little more challenging than others. But still, the concept of what he did was brilliant, and I really loved the way he did it.
That's a pretty hard figure to live up to there, Jerry. I'm gonna have to really pick up my pace on the books.
You're doing good. You're doing good.
All right. Well, let's talk about something a little more serious. The theme of our show is revealing light in the darkness. So, working in the healthcare industry, but in the form of security, how would you say that darkness or evil shows up in something like the healthcare setting?
Well, in the healthcare setting, that's an interesting supposition, that if you think about it, it's almost like a masquerade ball. That within the healthcare, you've got various degrees of costume. Some people are naturally born evil. They come in as themselves. Others come in lightly costumed. Some come in full mask, wardrobe, makeup, that they don't even realize how much they are evil. And I think our job really in the healthcare security world, and also in the law enforcement world, is to try to peel back some of those layers to recognize, is this truly evil, or is it, I don't think I'm coining a phrase here, misguided? Little plug there. That it's individuals are really have to be reduced down to their purest intentions, and sometimes they don't even know what they are. So what we have to try to do as healthcare security people is to try to help them manage their way through this minefield of concepts, of challenges, of emotions, and see what we have at the end of the day.
All right. Well, what about something that really does hit more on the true lines of evil, and that is, as far as being a soft target, what do you think makes something like a large hospital a soft target for people such as criminals or terrorists?
Well, really by definition, a healthcare institution is a place of healing. People come there for a purpose. Most people don't come to a hospital to hang out. They come there for either healing for themselves or a loved one or a friend. And it's an open door policy where people, all those that seek to enter, are allowed to enter, with a few exceptions into certain areas, but by and large, through the front door, anyone that wishes can pass through. Evil can pass through just as easily as those that are well-intentioned. And that presents the challenge to law enforcement, to security, to those of us that are charged with trying to make sure that we have a safe and secure environment for those that need healing to get as much medical help as they possibly can. And unfortunately, that opens it up to those that possibly have bad intentions. And it's a soft target because we allow it to be a soft target.
In other words, we could probably do a little better job if we made safety more a priority in a setting like that.
It's a trade-off.
Gotcha.
It's a trade-off.
I got you. Well, speaking of safety and security, law enforcement, you had to take part in a lot of hands-on incidents and situations, violent situations. And you as well as I, one of my favorite memories of Jerry, we took on a guy. I ended up having to tase the dude. He took a swing at me, whatever, and we got warnings ahead of time that he was a known gang member and all this kind of stuff. But Jerry was right there with me when I made the arrest. But speaking of having to go hands-on, you had a particular instructor that I've heard you talk about before. Maybe tell the people out there, a little bit about this.
I lived in Phoenix for plus 20 years, and as there I met a gentleman, a guide, a life guide, who was a Kempo sensei that I had, and he taught me so much about self-control. That's half of the game, is mentally thinking your way through a situation and addressing it from an intellectual point of view, and then also giving me the tools from a training point of view to be able to defend myself and others should the need arise. And it challenges any of us that have received any type of martial arts training or specialized training, law enforcement training, that we never want to use what we know, but should the occasion arise, we have to react, we have to respond. Life is not a spectator sport.
Right.
Life is engagement. And in the world that we lived in, you continue to live in it, that you have to engage to sometimes deal with situations that are unfriendly, you are dealing with a situation that can be challenging from a physical point of view. So for him, I owe tremendous amount of gratitude for allowing me to still even be sitting here, because there's some situations that we've gotten into that could have gotten very ugly very fast.
So, it sounds to me like he actually gave you a good foundation to kind of go into one of these last questions here, and that's, being surrounded by or just exposed by so much negativity and whether it's violence or just people who are very unstable or sick, instead of getting jaded, it seems like you had a good foundation from your sensei to help you, I guess, cope and deal with things mentally along those lines.
Well, he gave me a basis for reasoning. I think the core basis for which we are all here is in dealing with what are our true beliefs. Where is our foundation? Where do we drive up a stake and say, this is where the truth begins for me? And it's an individual situation. It's a situation where the physical aspects of what I have been taught in conjunction with my belief system, and the belief system is based historically on the Old Testament and living into the New Testament, taking the principles that we are taught to translate them into action, and action does not always mean these things.
Gotcha. Absolutely. Sometimes it just means pointing people the right way.
Sure.
All right. Well, I want to end on a good light-hearted note. So now that Jerry is retired,
Yes.
and he has the direct influence from an author, as well as the influence of a collection of autobiographies of one of the most famous authors in history, Jerry, I have one question for you. If you were going to write a book using what you know from studying Mark Twain, what would it be about? And now that you have the time, have you considered doing it?
Interesting supposition there. If I were to write a book, I think it would. I love the concept of writing an autobiographical, whatever the word is.
One of those auto words.
Yeah, one of those auto words. I would love to be able to do that so that I could possibly touch one person. To me, that is what our goal should be, all of us, in the lives that we live, is to do, act, say, produce things that might possibly influence one person in a positive way. That way we have done more than just leave a footprint in the sand, that we've actually left a mark that, as we talked a little earlier, life is more than 72.6 years of anticipation. We need to stretch, and we need to leave something behind that is noteworthy and hopefully in a positive way impact one person. If we do that, then I think we have successfully run the gauntlet and have met the challenge that those of us that believe that we have been charged with.
So you're going to write that book then?
We will see. We will see.
All right. Well, Jerry, again, thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate
it. This was an adventure.
Yeah, it was.
With barking dogs and everything. It might as well be an animal shelter.
Hey, it's a menagerie.
That's all for our interview for this portion of The Fortress. We'll be right back after our message from our friends.
G'day, mates. I bet you're wondering why I wanted to talk to you today. Well, I want to tell you a little bit about, the author Jason Fort and his great escapades controlling animals and such. Here you have him right here, sitting here wrestling a wild canine. And over here, look at this. Observe how the mighty Jason takes on a gator with his bare hands. He's got complete control, doesn't he? Heck, even his son's getting in on the action. Yes, that's the same gator, don't worry about it, size doesn't matter, right? Look at this, complete control over another wild and dangerous canine. Okay, so those pictures are a bunch of bunk, but anyway, what he really is good at is writing a cool story. And in those stories, he incorporates a lot of animals and animal attacks and all sorts of wild and crazy stuff. But how can you resist those things, right? And heck, look, he's got a face only a mother could love. So anyway, go check him out. If you go to www.jason-e-fort.com, you can find out everything you want about the author. Good day, mates.
Welcome back, guys. That's all for this little recording for YouTube. But before you go, I did want to tell you a little bit about next week. Next week, I'm going to be interviewing my illustrator for my books. And that's because he has a unique take on darkness today. He has he and I are kind of like kindred spirits. We both have a very creative side. He channels more of his creativity into his artwork, whereas I ended up, although I used to draw a lot growing up, I've ended up channeling my creativity into writing. But Caleb is going to talk to us a little bit about spiritual warfare, the darkness in this world, how it relates to maybe the government that we see around us, some of the happenings that we've had, especially in recent history. And we'll get into talking about all of that. We'll also talk a little bit about what Captain Clybourne talked about, or the Warden, as far as passion. Caleb definitely has a passion for what he does, and that's one of the reasons why I was drawn to his artwork. So that's what you can expect next week. So make sure you tune in some point during the week. I might actually have the YouTube video out earlier than the radio broadcast, but I will still do 2 separate recordings. So that's all for now. Until then, God bless everybody.